Good afternoon, everybody. This is Don again, and it is time for episode 69 of Practical Reality. Today, I'm going to ask you a very simple question with very powerful implications. Where is your edge? Now, you may not have given any prior consideration to this question. You may not even understand this question, but I'm going to make sure that you do before this video is over. First, let me explain the context of the question. It is taken from a book that I use in my daily life and my daily spiritual practice. It is called The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. I got this book a couple of years ago, and it was the 20th anniversary edition that I purchased, so I imagine the book was written in the early 2000s. At the top of the cover, you can see it says international bestseller, so I also imagine that a lot of people have read this book. So I think it's fair that before we begin answering the question, where is your edge, that we give it a little context. I'm going to read to you a few excerpts from the beginning of this book. This first part is from the preface to the 20th anniversary edition. In this new world, women are taking the lead. Men, no longer the sole breadwinner or the most purpose-driven member of the household, are rediscovering their worth both in the world and in their relationships. When a man's value was no longer measured by what he does for his finances or his social standing, how does he determine his worth? In this new world, a man's presence or his depth of awareness is his most valuable asset. A man's worth can be found in his depth of being. A shallow man who is easily perturbed and swayed is worth less to his woman and his world than a man whose presence is deeply sourced. A profound and steady gaze conveys more truth than furtive eyes. Full, even breathing is trusted more than shallow, jittery gasps. A man grounded in the unfathomable mystery of life, in touch with death's vastness, rather than merely flitting from one busy service activity to another, is sourced in his depth. Now a short section from the actual introduction. The Way of the Superior Man is a book written explicitly for people who have already achieved respect for both genders and sexual preferences, and who consider men and women to be social, economic, and political equals. Now we are ready to move to the next stage, grounded in this mutual respect and equality, but celebrating the sexual and spiritual passions inherent in the masculine-feminine polarity. So I think what's important to understand from those two passages is that David Deida is a well-evolved man who deserves respect, which means that what he writes should be taken seriously. I also want every watcher of my videos to understand that this advice, while originally given to men, can also apply to women. The author mentions this as well. If you are an evolved human being, then you allow no room in your heart for hatred, racism, or division. You practice tolerance, unity, and inclusion. And this is the basis from which you proceed. And if you find it difficult to practice those principles, then you need to examine yourself deeply and decide whether or not you have the courage to evolve and then approach your edge. So with that in mind, let's return to the question. Where is your edge? In order to understand the question, I'm going to read another small section from chapter 4 of the book, which is where this particular question is asked. Where do your fears stop you from making a larger contribution to mankind, from earning a higher income, or from earning money in a more creative and enjoyable way? If you were absolutely fearless, would you be earning a living exactly the same way you are now? Your edge is where you stop short or where you compromise your fullest gift and instead cater to your fears. So now, having read that, ask yourself the question again. Where is your edge? Now, you should be able to contemplate the question in a way that brings you a clear answer, but it might not happen right away. It might take you minutes, hours, or days to come up with the answer. For some people, the answer might be glaringly obvious, but for others, it might be something that causes you consternation because you can't quite understand the fears that are holding you back. But be aware of this. A few sentences after what I just read, he then writes, if you have deluded yourself and feel that you are not afraid, then you are lying to yourself. All men are afraid unless they are perfectly free. Now, perfectly free to me means that you are independently wealthy and you have self-actualized, which means you are living the best life you possibly can. And if you find yourself in that situation, congratulations. I think it's wonderful. But for the vast majority of people, that is not the case. Now, the next thing to consider is the fact that your fear may be holding you back. You are so afraid that you won't even approach your edge. That is the opposite of freedom. That is when you are a slave to your fears. According to the author, the way that you can tell whether or not this is your problem is that you have no vivaciousness. You're not full of life. You have no depth, no inspiration. And this may be an incredibly hard thing for you to admit. Or you may be very aware of it already, but you can't see a way to break out. This is the case for many people who have depression, something that I personally have been through. It takes courage and strength to grow in that condition, and you may need the support of friends or a professional in order to make real progress. In episode 67, I asked you if you have the courage to look yourself in the mirror and see who you really are. This is a daily task if you are going to find your edge. And remember, I said that once you pose the question to yourself, the answer may not come right away. It may require considerable thought. But when you find it, then you should have some sort of an awakening. You should feel a rush of good energy, and consequently, you might also feel sort of a burden being lifted off of your shoulders as you free up energy that was preventing you from realizing where your edge is. Now, something else the author advises that may seem a little counterintuitive. In chapter 8, he returns to the subject of your edge, and the title of the chapter actually is Lean Just Beyond Your Edge. Let me read a little bit of that chapter to you. Your fear is the sharpest definition of yourself. You should know it. You should feel it virtually constantly. It should become your friend so that you are no longer uncomfortable with it. Primary fear shows that you are at your edge. Staying with that fear and staying at your edge is the place where real transformation begins to occur. Let's look at fear for a moment. It is the most basic emotion. It may be the most often experienced emotion. From what I've read, it is the first emotion that you feel as you're being born. I'm sure it has to be a pretty terrifying experience to get expelled from your mother's birth canal after you've been bathing in a nice warm pool of amniotic fluid for the past 9 months. So yes, I understand his perspective. But to me, it doesn't mean that you live in a constant state of fear. It means you become comfortable with it. It means you are putting yourself towards your edge. You feel it, but you also use it as a tool for growth. Fear is uncomfortable. Anyone will tell you that there is no way to grow if you are fat and happy in your comfort zone. So this is something you must consider. Yes, it is difficult to think about living in fear all the time. I don't think that's what the author means, but I think he means that fear is something you have to get used to, something that you incorporate into your response when you're pushing yourself near your edge. It becomes something that fuels your growth, and from that perspective, it can be healthy. But since I recommend keeping your vibrational frequency high and controlling your internal thoughts, I don't think you should ever let fear become the controlling emotion that you live by. I think it should be something that you compartmentalize, that you create space for and recognize for what it is, and then deal with it in a constructive way that furthers you finding your purpose, which in turn fuels the vision you have for gaining that freedom that allows you to live without having to worry about time or money. So let's then say that you become one of those people who are truly free, who has nothing to fear. Does that mean you would stop challenging yourself? Does that mean you would live in your private palace surrounded by your toys every day, wasting time? I know that wouldn't be my reality. I would be out there keeping myself in good shape and working for the good of the community every day. I'm not going to enjoy my freedom without making a conscious decision to empower others to gain that same sort of freedom. In my opinion, that is everyone's purpose, to make this world a better place for everybody in it. We just have to lean beyond our edge to make ourselves into the kind of people who can fulfill that purpose. There is nothing more noble than that. Reading this section of the book has actually spurred me on to try and do exactly what he's saying. I'm starting out on some new business ventures that may take a while to get established, but just like this channel that I love doing, It is something I am not going to stop doing. At some point, I will have an update for you on that. I think David Dida would agree with me and wish you all luck in finding your edge and leaning beyond it. I hope everyone got something out of this video. Like, comment, and subscribe if you wish. I'd love to hear from you. I love conversations. Thank you. Have a great day. Peace, prosperity, and happiness to you all.